The only thing my husband Jonathan asked of me when he said goodbye was, "Please don't go to the retreat property, Elizabeth. Promise me." He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left, his eyes pleading. I promised him. I always respected his wishes, even when curiosity consumed me. But a few years after his death, curiosity finally won. What I found on that property would change my life forever. Now I understand why my husband wanted so desperately to keep me away from there. 17 years of marriage to Jonathan ended in a hospital bed following a massive stroke that no one could have predicted. At 58 years old, I found myself a widow with a daughter in college and a feeling of emptiness that seemed endless. I remember his last day with painful clarity. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and despair. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time as it slipped away from us. Jonathan's once robust frame looked diminished against the white sheets. His eyes, though clouded with pain medication, found mine with surprising lucidity. "Elizabeth," he whispered, his voice a shadow of the warm baritone I'd loved for nearly 2 decades. "Remember your promise." Those were his final coherent words to me. The promise he referred to was one he'd extracted repeatedly over the years, to never visit a property he vaguely mentioned owning in Lake Arrowhead. Whenever I'd pressed for details, he'd grown tense, changing the subject with practiced efficiency. Eventually, I stopped asking, assuming it was connected to his difficult childhood, a topic he avoided with similar determination. As a literature professor, I'd spent my career analyzing stories, finding meaning in narratives both written and lived. Yet my own husband remained partially a mystery to me, with chapters of his life deliberately kept closed. I respected these boundaries, believing that everyone deserves their private spaces, their unshared memories. After Jonathan's funeral, a surprisingly well-attended affair for a man who kept to himself, our home in Pasadena felt cavernous. Too many rooms, too many memories, too much silence. Ashley, our 21-year-old daughter, stayed for 2 weeks before returning to her junior year at UC Berkeley. She inherited her father's analytical mind and my stubbornness, a combination that served her well in her computer science program, but made grief a complicated process for her. "Mom, you'll be okay?" she asked the morning she left, her suitcase already in her car. Her dark eyes, so like her father's, searched mine with concern. "I've been teaching college students for 30 years, I reminded her with forced lightness. "If I can handle freshman literature classes, I can handle an empty house." She hugged me fiercely, her slender frame surprisingly strong. "Dad would want you to move forward," she whispered. I nodded against her shoulder, not trusting my voice. Moving forward seemed impossible when every corner of our home contained Jonathan's ghost. The coffee mug he favored still in the cabinet, his reading glasses on his nightstand, the garden he'd meticulously maintained now beginning to show signs of neglect. Life continued its cruel course of normality while I was still figuring out how to breathe without Jonathan nearby. I returned to teaching after a brief leave, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of academia. My colleagues were kind but awkward, unsure how to address the gaping hole in my life. Students were mercifully self-absorbed, caring more about their grades than my personal tragedy. 2 months passed in this strange limbo of existence, not quite living, not quite grieving properly. I was organizing Jonathan's study one Tuesday afternoon, sorting papers with mechanical efficiency, when his attorney called. "Mrs. Davis, this is Mr. Harrison. I need to see you in my office. It's about Jonathan's estate." I frowned, cradling the phone against my shoulder. I thought everything was settled. The will was straightforward. "There's one matter we've been instructed to address only after a specific time period. Could you come in tomorrow morning?" The formality in his voice triggered an unease I couldn't identify. "Of course." The next day, I dressed with particular care. A navy pantsuit that Jonathan always said made me look formidable. I wasn't sure what I was preparing for, but some instinct told me to armor myself. Mr. Harrison's office was in a converted Victorian in Old Town Pasadena, all polished wood and brass fixtures, exuding the quiet confidence of old money and discretion. "Mrs. Davis," he greeted me, rising from behind his imposing desk. He was a thin man in his 60s, with silver-rimmed glasses and a perpetually serious expression. "Thank you for coming. You mentioned something about Jonathan's estate?" He gestured for me to sit, then opened a drawer. "I have something I must deliver to you," he said, sliding a small box and an envelope across his polished wooden desk. Jonathan left specific instructions that these were only to be delivered after his passing and after a 2-month waiting period. The box contained a heavy antique key with a leaf-shaped metal keychain. The envelope bore my name in Jonathan's unmistakable handwriting, precise architect's lettering that I would recognize anywhere. My fingers trembled as I traced the letters. "What is this key for?" I asked, turning it over in my fingers. "It's for a property in Lake Arrowhead." Harrison's expression remained professionally neutral. "Your husband purchased it approximately 4 years ago, but he left explicit instructions that you were only to learn about it after his death." My heart pounded. Jonathan didn't own any other properties besides our home. He never mentioned a country retreat. More importantly, why did he make me promise never to go there only to reveal its existence later? "It's called the Crestwood Estate," the attorney continued. "Apparently it was the house where Jonathan spent part of his childhood. He reacquired it after many years, though it had changed hands several times." "Wait, this doesn't make sense. I interrupted. Jonathan always avoided talking about his childhood. When I brought up Lake Arrowhead, he would get tense, change the subject. Why would he buy a house there? Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses. "I couldn't tell you, Mrs. Davis, but there's another important detail. The property has become extremely valuable in the last 2 years. "How so?" "A large developer, Summit Resorts, is building a luxury resort in the area. Your husband's property is strategically located. They've already made several multi-million-dollar offers for the house." My head was spinning. Jonathan had never been wealthy. We lived comfortably on his engineer's salary and mine as a university professor, but nothing that would allow him to buy a second house, especially in a desirable area like Lake Arrowhead. And why keep it secret? With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. "My dearest Elizabeth, if you're reading this, it means I left sooner than I expected. Forgive me for all the secrets I kept. The house is yours now. Over the past 4 years, I transformed that somber place from my childhood into something I hope you find beautiful. I know I made you promise never to go there. I am undoing that promise now. In fact, I ask you to go just once before you decide what to do with the property. In the house's study, you'll find my laptop. The password is the date of our first meeting, followed by hope. The word you taught me to feel again. I love you more than I could ever express, Jonathan." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears blurring my vision. Even in death, Jonathan still had the power to surprise me. "I need to see this place," I said. "There is a complication," Mr. Harrison interrupted. "Jonathan's family is contesting the will. His brother, Michael Davis, alleges that Jonathan was not mentally capable when he purchased the property. That's absurd. My husband was the most lucid and centered person I've ever known. Even so, they have filed legal motions. Considering the current value of the property, this could turn into a complicated battle." I pocketed the key, a sudden determination seizing me. "I'm going to Lake Arrowhead today." The drive to Lake Arrowhead took nearly 2 hours, winding through the San Bernardino National Forest. As I climbed an elevation, The air became cooler, the scent of pine replacing the city's smog. My mind raced with questions. Why had Jonathan kept this property secret? Why had he made me promise never to visit, only to reverse that request after death? I followed the GPS directions, turning onto increasingly narrow roads until I reached a carved wooden gate with the Crestwood Estate in wrought iron. My heart pounded as I turned the key in the lock. The gate swung open with a soft creak, revealing a property much more impressive than I had imagined. It wasn't just a country house. It was a stone and wood mansion surrounded by impeccably maintained gardens and ancient oak trees. A stone path wound through perfect lawns to the main entrance. Everything looked new or recently renovated. Nothing here suggested the traumatic childhood Jonathan had been so resistant to discussing. This place had been transformed with love and dedication. My husband's hands were in every detail, though I never knew of its existence until now. My hands trembled as I put the key in the main door. The lock turned with a satisfying click, and I stepped into the secret world of the man with whom I had shared nearly 2 decades of life. What I saw inside made me grab the doorframe to stay upright. The entrance opened into a large double-height living room with a stone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that took my breath away. It was the paintings. On every wall, in every available space, were paintings of flowers. Not just any flowers, but orchids of every possible type and color. My lifelong passion, which Jonathan always supported with silent affection, surrounded me in a gallery dedicated to my greatest love. And there, on a table near the window overlooking the gardens, sat a silver laptop with a single white orchid placed on the lid. I moved through the space in a daze, trailing my fingers over the furniture. Everything was new, yet somehow felt familiar, as if Jonathan had selected each piece with my taste in mind. The kitchen featured the farmhouse sink I'd always admired in design magazines. The library shelves were filled with first editions of my favorite classics. It was a home built for me by someone who knew me intimately, yet I'd never set foot in it before. The orchid paintings varied in style and execution. Some were photorealistic, others impressionistic. All were beautiful, celebrating the flowers I'd loved since college. Before our marriage, before my teaching career took over, I'd been an art student with a passion for botanical illustration. Life had redirected that passion into teaching literature, but Jonathan had never forgotten. I was examining a particularly striking painting of a rare blue cattleya when the sound of tires on gravel announced that I was no longer alone. Through the window, I saw a black SUV pull up behind my car. 3 men got out, all bearing Jonathan's unmistakable facial resemblance. The same straight nose, the same almond-shaped eyes. The Davis clan had arrived, and by the severe expressions on their faces, they were not here to welcome the widow to her newfound property. I quickly closed the front door, my heart racing. I watched through the side window as they stopped on the porch, whispering among themselves before the eldest, a graying version of Jonathan, pounded loudly on the door. "Mrs. Elizabeth? We know you're in there. We need to talk." His voice had the same tight edge Jonathan's did when he got nervous. I remained silent, moving away from the door. Jonathan's vague warnings about his family had always been emphatic. Now, facing them, my instinct screamed caution. The pounding came again, more insistent. "Elizabeth, I'm Michael Davis, Jonathan's older brother. These are my brothers, Daniel and Thomas. We're here about the property." Of course, they were not here for Jonathan, not to meet the woman his brother loved for 17 years. They were there for the house that was suddenly worth millions. I looked at the laptop on the table. The answers I sought might be there, not with strangers on the porch. Ignoring the increasingly aggressive knocks, I went to the table and typed the password. October 12th, 96, Hope. The screen came to life, opening a folder named For Elizabeth. Inside were hundreds of video files, each chronologically dated, starting the day after the funeral and extending an entire year into the future. With trembling hands, I clicked on the first one. Jonathan's face filled the screen. Not the pale, emaciated face of his final days in the hospital, but healthy, full of life, clearly recorded months earlier. "Hello, my love." He smiled that crooked way that always melted me. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and you came to Crestwood, despite my years of begging you not to. I should have guessed you wouldn't resist, especially after Harrison told you about the house." A knot formed in my throat. Even now, he knew me so well. "I recorded one video for every day of your first year without me. A year of companionship while you processed grief. A year explaining everything I should have told you in life." He briefly lowered his gaze, then looked back at me with determination. "Starting with why I bought back the house I swore never to set foot in again." Outside, the pounding had stopped. Through the window, I saw the men return to their SUV, pulling out papers, conversing with stern expressions. Jonathan continued. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a cerebral aneurysm, a time bomb I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. His eyes softened. "I chose not to tell you or Ashley. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want our final years to be lived in the shadow of death." Shock and anger flooded me. He hid the diagnosis, made medical decisions without me. He denied me the chance to prepare, to consciously value our final moments. "I know you're angry right now," he said as if reading my thoughts. "You have every right to be. But I hope you understand I made that decision out of love, not cowardice." The men outside were making calls, walking around the driveway with the frustrated energy of denied entitlement. When I received my diagnosis, I decided to use the time I had left to create something meaningful for you. You've always loved orchids. You always talked about having a space just for yourself to cultivate them someday. So I found the last place anyone would expect me to go, the house I left at 18, swearing never to return. He leaned toward the camera. "What my brothers don't know is that I legally bought the house from my father before he died. The old man was bankrupt after years of gambling and drinking. He sold it to me for a fraction of the value, desperate for money, making me swear not to tell my brothers, who still thought they would inherit it someday." That explained the legal challenge. They believed they had rights to a property Jonathan had legitimately purchased. "The house was in ruins when I bought it, Elizabeth, just like my childhood here. But this time, I had the resources to transform it. Every business trip over the last 4 years, I was here overseeing renovations, building something for you." Outside, the brothers were approaching the door again. This time, Michael held a document against the window for me to see. Some kind of court order. "My brothers will come for it," Jonathan continued in the video, his expression hardening. "They never wanted the house until last year when the resort project began. Suddenly the worthless property they mocked me for buying became a gold mine. They will try anything to take it from you." One of the brothers was on the phone again, his expression triumphant as he hung up. "In the bottom drawer of this table is a blue folder with all the legal documents you need. The house is unquestionably yours. I made sure of it." Jonathan's face softened. "But Elizabeth, whether you keep it or sell it is entirely your choice. I built this place for you. I filled it with beauty for you, but I don't want it to become a burden." A police cruiser was driving up the driveway. The brothers watched its approach with satisfied expressions. "One last thing," Jonathan said. "In the conservatory behind the house, you'll find the rare orchid collection I spent years cultivating. The team I hired will continue to care for them whether you are here or not. They are my final gift to you, along with the means to appreciate them." The video ended. freezing on Jonathan's smiling face just as the knock on the door resumed. More authoritative. "Mrs. Davis, county officer, we need you to open the door, please." With a deep sigh, I closed the laptop, retrieved the blue folder from the drawer, and went to face what came next. As I reached for the doorknob, my cell phone rang. Ashley, our daughter, calling from college. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom? This isn't a good time," I said quickly. "Mom," her voice was tight with irritation, "why didn't you tell me about Dad's house or the developer proposal? The uncles just called me offering a fair deal if I help them contest the will. What is going on?" So they had already contacted my daughter. That perception ignited something fierce and protective inside me. They weren't just coming for me. They were trying to manipulate my grieving child. "I'll explain everything later, I promise," I said, watching the officer converse with the brothers. "But Ashley, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Those men are not our friends." "Mom, if there's money involved..." "This is not about money," I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "It's about what your father wanted. Please trust me." After a moment of silence, she sighed. "Okay, but call me as soon as you can." I hung up and opened the door to face a young county officer, Davis, flanked by the three Davises, whose expressions ranged from smug to openly hostile. "Mrs. Davis, I'm Officer Martinez. These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of the property as part of an ongoing inheritance dispute." I smiled calmly, channeling the strength Jonathan always admired in me. "Of course, officer, but first, I think you should see this." I handed him the blue folder containing Jonathan's documentation. My husband anticipated this exact situation. Michael stepped forward with a disdainful gesture. "Family disputes are complicated, officer. My sister-in-law is understandably emotional and confused." "Actually," I interrupted him, "I am neither emotional nor confused. I am a widow on a property that legally belongs to me, facing 3 strangers who happen to share my late husband's DNA. I turned to the officer. "And I would appreciate it if you would review these documents before allowing anyone onto my property." The deputy took the folder, his expression neutral as he began to examine the contents. The Davis brothers exchanged glances, their confidence visibly wavering. I thought of Jonathan's video, of the secret he kept to spare Ashley and me unnecessary suffering, of the magnificent gift he created in his final years. Whatever game his brothers were playing, I was determined not to lose the last tangible expression of my husband's love without a fight. The deputy looked up from the documents. His expression shifted. "These appear to be in order, ma'am. A clear deed transfer, notarized statements, certified bank records of the original purchase." He turned to the brothers. "Gentlemen, I see no grounds to force an inspection today. This appears to be a matter for the civil courts." Michael's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd." "That woman has no right." "That woman," I interjected calmly, "is Jonathan Davis's wife of 17 years, and I have every right to be here." As the brothers reluctantly retreated to their SUV, followed by the apologetic deputy, I felt a strange mix of loss and discovery. The husband I thought I knew completely had kept secrets, some painful, others breathtakingly beautiful. Now I faced a choice: retreat to the safety of my former life, or fully immerse myself in this unexpected legacy and the battle that came with it. I closed the door, returned to the table, and reopened the laptop. Tomorrow's video awaited me, and with it more pieces of the man I loved and was only now beginning to fully understand. Outside, the Davis brothers might have lost this skirmish, but their expressions as they drove away made one thing clear: the war for Crestwood Estate had just begun. I spent that night in Jonathan's house, or rather our house, surrounded by the evidence of his secret labor of love. Sleep completely evaded me, my mind buzzing with revelations. The fatal illness he concealed, the transformed house, his brother's determination to claim it, and the hundreds of video messages waiting on the laptop. At dawn, I explored the property properly for the first time. The main house was a masterpiece of renovation, blending original rustic elements with modern comfort. Every room reflected careful consideration of my tastes, from the library stocked with first editions of my favorite books to the reading nook overlooking the garden, perfect for autumn mornings. But it was the conservatory that truly took my breath away. As Jonathan promised in the video, a stunning collection of orchids filled the glass-enclosed space. Some were so rare that I'd only seen them in specialized books. A blue Cattleya walkeriana, almost impossible to find, bloomed proudly like the queen of the place. "Good morning, ma'am." The voice startled me. A middle-aged woman appeared from among the plants, holding a sprayer. "I'm Miss Jackson. Your husband hired me to care for the orchids." "Elizabeth Davis," I replied, extending my hand, "though I suspect you already knew that." She smiled kindly. "Mr. Jonathan talked about you a lot during his visits. He said you had a special touch with plants that he could never quite match." "Did you know my husband well?" Ms. Jackson hesitated. "As well as he allowed anyone to know him, I suppose. He was here at least once a month for the past 4 years, overseeing everything personally." That sounded like Jonathan. Methodical, attentive to detail, always preferring to do things himself rather than delegate. "The blue cattleya over there," Ms. Jackson continued, pointing to the orchid I had admired. "He spent nearly 2 years searching for it. He said it reminded him of one you saw once at a show and never forgot." My heart ached. The orchid exhibition at the Atlanta Botanical Garden 10 years ago. I had commented on that flower only once, and Jonathan remembered. "Did he ever mention anything about his health?" I asked hesitantly. A shadow crossed Ms. Jackson's face. "Not directly, but in the last 6 months, he pushed harder. He worked long hours, like a man with a deadline." The confirmation struck me, but it also explained the hurried quality I'd sensed in Jonathan during his final months. I had attributed it to work stress, never imagining he was creating all this while knowing his time was limited. "His brothers were here yesterday," I commented, watching her reaction carefully. Her face hardened. "They've been lurking around ever since Summit Resorts announced the project, suddenly very interested in the family home they hadn't visited in decades." She adjusted the irrigation system before continuing. "What can I say about them? Michael is the oldest. He has an investment firm in Chicago. He always treated Jonathan as if he were doing him a favor by acknowledging him. Daniel is the middle one, a lawyer, good with words. Thomas is the youngest, always in Michael's shadow." She shook her head. "When Jonathan came back to buy the property, they scoffed at him for wasting money on a hole in the wall. Until the resort started planning." This matched the fragments Jonathan had shared over the years. His difficult childhood, his escape to college, his reluctance to discuss his family. "They'll be back," I said, more to myself than to Ms. Jackson. "Certainly," she nodded. But Mr. Jonathan prepared for that. He always thought several steps ahead. Back in the house, I forced myself to eat something before opening the laptop for the day's video. Jonathan appeared, seated in what I now recognized as the house's library. "Good morning, my love. I hope you slept well in our new home." He smiled that crooked smile I missed with a physical ache. "Today I want to show you something special." The camera moved as he walked through the house, down a hallway I hadn't explored, stopping at a locked door. "This room is just for you. The key is in the top drawer of the nightstand, that antique silver one with the orchid engraving." I paused the video, went to the master bedroom, and found the key exactly where he described. Following Jonathan's path in the video, I located the inconspicuous door at the end of the east wing. The key turned smoothly. I pushed the door open and gasped. A fully equipped art studio filled the large corner room, bathed in perfect light from floor-to-ceiling windows. Easels, canvases, paints, brushes, everything an artist could desire, arranged with loving precision. I hadn't painted in 15 years. After art school, I abandoned my artistic dreams to teach literature, to keep us afloat while Jonathan built his career to raise Ashley. Over the years, someday became a distant dream, then a bittersweet memory of a path not taken. The video continued, Jonathan's voice pulling me back to the laptop I'd carried with me. You gave up so much for us, Elizabeth. Your painting was the first sacrifice. Even though you never complained, I always promised myself I would give it back to you someday. Tears blurred my vision as I surveyed the studio. The professional materials, the reference books organized on the shelves, the windows oriented to capture the perfect light. There's one more thing, Jonathan continued. Look in the cabinet beneath the window bench. I walked toward the cushioned bench near the window overlooking the garden, now golden in the morning light. Beneath it, recessed into the wall, was a cabinet I might have missed had I not been told to look for it. Inside was a flat archival box. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid and fell to my knees in shock. My paintings. Dozens of them. All the work I created in college, pieces I thought had been lost in our moves over the years. Jonathan had preserved them, protected them, stored them for 15 years until he could return them to me in this perfect space. On top lay a small canvas I recognized immediately. My final project before graduation, a self-portrait of a young woman looking toward the future, with eyes bright with possibility. Jonathan had asked to keep it the day I finished it. Attached was a handwritten note. She's still in there, Elizabeth, the woman who painted with such passion and vision. I gave you the space. The rest is up to you. I pressed the note to my chest, overwhelmed by love and loss in equal measure. Jonathan had seen me, truly seen me, in ways I hadn't allowed myself to be seen in years. The sound of vehicles on the gravel tore me from that emotional moment. From the studio window, I saw 2 SUVs approaching, the familiar black one belonging to the Davis brothers, and behind it, a silver one I instantly recognized. Ashley had arrived, and by the way she confidently stepped out of her car and walked toward her uncle's, it seemed they had already begun working on her. My daughter, Jonathan's daughter, with his dark hair and my stubbornness, was smiling and shaking hands with the uncle she had never met before. Any fragile peace I had found in Jonathan's posthumous gifts evaporated in the face of this new complication. The battle for Crestwood Estate had just become much more personal. Toi hioroi, shinloi, vihiusai yuko, jude la fantu kuko chuyen vidozai huang hangan du. I watched them through the window, Ashley chatting animatedly with the uncle she'd never known existed until yesterday. My daughter's face was alight with curiosity as Michael placed a paternal hand on her shoulder, gesturing toward the house with proprietary confidence. Mom, I'm here with Uncle Mike and the others, Ashley texted. Coming in now. We need to talk. Uncle Mike. They'd known each other for less than a day, and she was already claiming family connection. I tucked Jonathan's note into my pocket, closed the studio door, and went downstairs to face this new alliance. They entered without knocking, Ashley using the familiarity of a daughter, while the brothers followed her like wolves behind an unsuspecting guide. Mom! Ashley hugged me briefly, then pulled away, her eyes scanning the stunning living room. This place is incredible. Why did Dad never tell us about it? Before I could answer, Michael stepped forward, his resemblance to Jonathan painfully sharp. Elizabeth, I think we started off on the wrong foot yesterday. We were surprised by your sudden arrival, just as you were by ours. His conciliatory tone didn't match his calculating gaze. Beside him, Daniel maintained a carefully neutral expression, though he held a leather folder that undoubtedly contained legal documents. Thomas stood slightly behind, watching silently. "Ashley," I said, ignoring Michael completely, "I thought we agreed you wouldn't engage with your father's brothers until we had talked." She blushed slightly. "They called again this morning with a very reasonable proposal. I thought I should at least hear them out in person." Her chin lifted defiantly. "Besides, they're my family too." "Family you didn't know existed until yesterday?" I gently reminded her. "Only because Dad kept them away from us," she countered. "Just like he hid this incredible place. Doesn't that strike you as strange? What else was he hiding?" The question veered uncomfortably close to the revelations in Jonathan's videos. "Your father had complicated relationships with his brothers," I said carefully. "He had his reasons for the distance he kept." Michael made a dismissive gesture. "Ancient history. Brothers fight, especially in difficult families like ours. What matters now is moving forward together." "Exactly." Ashley nodded with the earnestness of someone who believed she was being perfectly reasonable. "Uncle Mike explained everything. This house has been in the Davis family for generations. Dad bought it from Grandpa Davis, but it was always meant to be shared among the brothers eventually." I suppressed a sigh. They had been working on her for less than a day, and she was already repeating their version of events. "And the sudden interest in the property has nothing to do with the luxury resort being built next door?" I asked softly. Daniel stepped forward, opening his folder. "The real estate situation is only one aspect of a complex legal picture. We've prepared a fair settlement offer that honors Jonathan's wishes while recognizing the Davis family's historical claim to the property. We're prepared to be very generous," Michael added, placing a paternal hand on Ashley's shoulder again. "1/3 for you, Elizabeth, 1/3 for Ashley, and 1/3 divided among us brothers. Everyone wins." Ashley looked at me expectantly, clearly already convinced by the proposal. "It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge place. We could sell the whole thing, walk away with millions, and Dad's family stays united." "Your father specifically left this property to me," I said, looking Michael squarely in the eye. "Not to you, not to his brothers." "Out of confusion and misplaced sentimentality," Michael countered smoothly. "Jonathan wasn't thinking clearly in his final years." A flash of anger burned through me. "My husband was perfectly lucid until the day he died." "Then why all the secrecy?" Thomas spoke for the first time, his voice softer than his brother's, but no less sharp. "Why hide the property purchase from his wife and daughter? Why the elaborate arrangements with the attorney? Those are not the actions of a man thinking rationally." I thought of the videos, the renovated house, the art studio, every element meticulously planned as a final gift. None of it suggested confusion or impaired judgment. "Mom," Ashley said, her voice softer now, "I know this is hard. Dad left us, and now we're uncovering all these secrets, but this proposal makes financial sense. We'd both be secure for the rest of our lives." The door opened behind them, and Ms. Jackson appeared, her face worried. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Davis? I saw the cars arrive." The brothers turned, visibly irritated by the interruption. Michael narrowed his eyes. "This is a family matter. Ms. Jackson is my employee," I said firmly. "She is welcome in my home." "Actually," Daniel interjected, "her employment status is among the disputed assets pending resolution of our legal claim." Ms. Jackson didn't back down. "Mr. Jonathan hired me personally. He made me promise I would look after the place and after Mrs. Elizabeth if anything happened to him." "We'll review all employee contracts," Michael said dismissively. I had heard enough. "I think it's time for all of you to leave." I looked directly at the brothers, then softened my gaze as I turned to Ashley. "Except you, of course. You're always welcome to stay." "You're not even going to consider their offer?" Ashley asked incredulously. "I will review any written proposal with my own attorney," I replied. "But I will not be pressured in my own home." Michael's conciliatory mask dropped, revealing the ruthless businessman beneath. "This property is worth tens of millions with the resort project. We can do this amicably, or we can make things very difficult." "Is that a threat?" I asked, calmer than I felt. "A reality check," he corrected. "You are a university professor facing a legal battle against adversaries with significantly greater resources. Jonathan may have had good intentions, but he put you in an untenable position." I thought of the blue folder with its meticulous documentation, the videos showing Jonathan's lucid planning, the property that represented his final act of love. "I believe my husband knew exactly what he was doing," I said calmly. "Now please leave. Ashley, you're welcome to stay for lunch if you'd like." She looked conflicted, glancing between me and her newly discovered uncles. "I think I'll go with them for now. We have more to discuss." She kissed my cheek quickly. "Think about the offer, Mom. Please." I watched them leave, a sense of emptiness expanding in my chest. In just 24 hours, my daughter had been drawn into the orbit of men Jonathan spent his whole life avoiding. "Ms." Jackson waited until the cars disappeared down the driveway before speaking. "Mrs. Davis, there's something you should know. Something your husband asked me not to mention unless it became absolutely necessary." I turned to her, mentally exhausted, but forcing myself to pay attention. "What is it?" "It's about the true extent of the property and what's really hidden here." She gestured toward the gardens. "We better walk. Some things shouldn't be discussed inside the house where walls might have ears." As I followed Ms. Jackson across the lawn, the morning sun illuminated the beautiful property my husband had secretly created. Whatever revelation awaited me, I was sure of one thing. Jonathan had anticipated this battle, perhaps even Ashley's vulnerability to his brother's manipulation. The question was, had he prepared me enough to win a fight I never knew was coming? Ms. Jackson led me past the main conservatory toward a tool shed I hadn't yet explored. Unlike the perfectly renovated structures on the rest of the property, this building maintained its original rustic appearance, deliberately unimproved to seem unimportant. "Your husband was a careful man," Ms. Jackson said, producing an old iron key. "After his brother's first visit last year, he became even more cautious." "They visited before? Jonathan never mentioned that." Ms. Jackson nodded gravely. "They showed up unannounced as soon as they heard about the resort project. Your husband was here overseeing the construction of the art studio. They didn't recognize him at first. He had let his beard grow out during the treatment." The casual mention of Jonathan's treatment hit me like a wave of renewed grief. While I was innocently teaching literature classes, my husband was here, sick, creating this sanctuary while fending off his predatory brothers. "What happened?" He watched them from a distance, then left without revealing himself. "That night he made changes to the property plans, starting with this." Ms. Jackson opened the shed door, revealing an ordinary interior. Gardening tools, equipment, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light, streaming through wall cracks. She moved confidently toward the back corner, pushing aside several stacked boxes to expose a trap door recessed into the concrete floor. "Your husband installed this entrance last winter. The workers thought they were building a wine cellar." She pulled the heavy door upward, revealing a sturdy ladder descending into darkness. "After you." Curiosity overriding apprehension, I followed Ms. Jackson down the stairs. At the bottom, she flipped a switch and lights came on, revealing a concrete tunnel stretching out before us. "What is this place?" "Your husband called it the vault. I call it genius. The tunnel stretched for about 100 feet before opening into a large room filled with file cabinets, a table with computer equipment, and walls covered with maps and documents. "Welcome to Jonathan's war room," Ms. Jackson said with a touch of pride. Everything he compiled about his brothers, their businesses, and the true value of the Crestwood estate. I approached the nearest wall where a detailed map showed not only the property, but the surrounding area for miles. Red markings indicated the locations of the resort project with handwritten annotations about values, construction phases, and real estate impact. "I don't understand," I said, turning to Ms. Jackson. "Jonathan knew about the resort project?" "Not at first. He bought this place to renovate it for you, pure and simple. But about 2 years ago, when Summit Resorts began preliminary studies, he hired a real estate consultant to evaluate the impact on Crestwood." Ms. Jackson pointed to the map. "They uncovered something the developer was trying to keep secret until all land purchases were finalized. The full project is 3 times larger than they publicly announced." I studied the map more closely, noting how the markings extended far beyond the area the press had publicized. Phase 2 of the resort will include a golf course that will require part of the property adjacent to ours, Ms. Jackson continued. "They've already bought almost all the necessary land except the Crestwood estate," I concluded, beginning to understand. "Your husband verified it with 3 independent specialists. This property's strategic position can completely block the planned expansion. Without it, the project loses half its projected value. So the property is even more valuable than his brothers imagine. Exponentially. But that's not all." Ms. Jackson moved toward a file cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. Jonathan documented decades of questionable business practices by the 3 brothers: tax evasion, insider trading, misappropriation of client funds, enough evidence to professionally ruin them if it ever came to light. I leafed through the meticulous documentation, recognizing Jonathan's thorough approach to problem solving. Email printouts, financial records, sworn affidavits from former employees. He had built an airtight case against his brothers. Why would he compile all this? Protection. He knew they would come for the house as soon as he was gone. He wanted you to have ammunition. I thought of Michael's smug confidence, Daniel's legal maneuvering, their swift work to win over Ashley. "He anticipated everything." "Not everything," Ms. Jackson said calmly. "He didn't expect them to get to your daughter so quickly." The memory of Ashley's seeming betrayal stung. "They're manipulating her with half-truths and promises of wealth, and playing on her grief." Jackson nodded. "She lost her father. Suddenly they're offering her a connection to him through shared blood and history. A powerful draw for a grieving young woman." She was right. Ashley was always a daddy's girl, sharing Jonathan's analytical mind and love for puzzles. His death left her adrift, vulnerable to anyone who offered a connection to him. "What do I do now?" I asked, almost to myself. "That depends on what you want," Ms. Jackson replied. "You could sell everything and walk away rich, but perhaps forever alienated from your daughter. You could fight the brothers legally using this evidence, which might win the battle but worsen the family wounds. Or you could do what your husband always did, think 3 steps ahead and find the path no one expects." I considered that as I continued to examine the war room. On the table was a framed photograph I had never seen before. A teenage Jonathan standing proudly next to an award-winning orchid, his face lit up with an innocent joy I had rarely glimpsed in the man I married. "That was the first cattleya he ever grew," Ms. Jackson said, noticing my focus on the photo. "The one bright spot in his childhood here. His brothers destroyed it while Jonathan was away at school, just to hurt him." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Jonathan's support of my love for flowers and art. despite having no personal interest in them. The magnificent conservatory and studio were not just gifts. They were the reclamation of something precious his brothers had stolen. I picked up the photograph, a plan beginning to form in my mind. "Ms. Jackson, does the laptop with Jonathan's videos work down here?" She nodded. "There's a secure network throughout the property. Your husband made sure of it." "Excellent. I need to watch the next few videos ahead of schedule. Then I want you to schedule some meetings for me." "With whom?" "First, my daughter alone, away from her uncle's influence. Then my attorney. And finally," I looked at the wall of evidence Jonathan had compiled against his brothers, "I think I'd like to talk to the executives at Summit Resorts." Ms. Jackson smiled for the first time since we entered the hidden bunker. "You're planning something your husband would approve of." "I'm planning something worthy of the man who loved me enough to create all of this," I corrected, a new determination firming my voice. "And I'm going to need your help." "Whatever you need, Mrs. Davis," Ms. Jackson promised. "Your husband gave me a second chance when no one else would. I owe him everything. And by extension, I owe it to you." This was one more facet of Jonathan I hadn't known. His quiet generosity extending beyond our immediate family, changing lives I had never heard of. As we left the bunker, carefully hiding the entrance again, I felt a strange sense of connection with my late husband. Not the grief that had dominated the past few weeks, but a partnership that somehow continued beyond death. He had left me not just a property and material security, but tools and knowledge to forge my own path. The Davis brothers believed they were facing a naive widow who was no match for them. They had no idea what was coming. Over the next 48 hours, I barely slept. Fueled by determination and the growing clarity of my plan, I watched an entire week's worth of Jonathan's videos in a single night. Each one revealed more of his strategy and the depth of his foresight. "They will try to divide and conquer," he warned in one recording, as if speaking directly to my current situation. "Michael will be the friendly face, Daniel the legal threat, Thomas the silent observer, and they will target Ashley. She is the easiest path to destabilize your position." In another video, he showed documents from the developer he had obtained through contacts in the county office. "Summit Resorts is determined to keep Phase 2 of the project secret until all necessary land is secured. If they discover that we know about the golf course before they try to buy us out, the negotiating value triples." Armed with Jonathan's insights and my own growing understanding, I arranged to meet Ashley at a coffee shop in the city, away from the influence of the Davis brothers and the emotional pull of the sanctuary Jonathan created. She arrived 15 minutes late, already defensive before she even sat down. "I can't stay long. Uncle Mike is taking me to meet some investors this afternoon." "Uncle Mike," I repeated softly. "You've become very close in 3 days." She flushed. "They've been kind and welcoming, which is more than I can say for you. You're treating Dad's family like enemies." I sipped my coffee, choosing my next words carefully. "Do you remember that narrative theory class you loved first semester? About how the same story changes completely depending on who's telling it. What does that have to do with our situation? You've only heard their version of this story. I'm asking you to consider that there might be another perspective. Your father's." "Dad's dead," she said bluntly, pain flashing in her face. "And he obviously didn't trust us enough to tell us about this place while he was alive." I reached into my purse and pulled out a tablet. "He actually left something for both of us." "What is this?" "Your father made videos, Ashley, hundreds of them. Messages to guide me, to guide us after he was gone." I turned the tablet toward her, queuing up the video Jonathan had labeled, "For Ashley when she needs it." Her face paled. "He made videos? He knew he was dying?" "He was diagnosed 3 years ago with a cerebral aneurysm," I said softly, finally sharing the truth. He chose not to tell us. He wanted to spare us watching him decline. That's impossible. He would have told me. But uncertainty was already creeping into her voice. Watch the video, Ashley. Listen to him. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. Jonathan's face appeared, healthy, vibrant, his eyes crinkling with that smile that was so characteristic of him. Hello, my brilliant girl. If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably angry about all the secrets I kept. He chuckled softly. You never liked being kept in the dark about anything, even as a kid. Tears welled in Ashley's eyes as her father continued. I should have told you I was sick. I should have given you time to prepare, to ask all those questions you're so good at forming. But I was selfish. I wanted our final years together to be normal, not overshadowed by my diagnosis. I hope someday you can forgive me for that choice. Jonathan leaned toward the camera. But there's something else you need to know. Something about my brothers I never shared with you. Our falling out wasn't some petty family squabble, Ashley. They defrauded my share of the inheritance when I was 19. They used my name on fake documents while I was away at college. When I found out and threatened to expose them, they threatened to implicate me as a willing accomplice. Ashley's hand covered her mouth, her eyes glued to the screen. I left Lake Arrowhead. I moved to Pasadena. I met your mother. I built a life. I raised you. That was more than enough. His expression hardened. But my brothers never changed. Whatever they're telling you right now, remember this. They want control of the family property, not out of sentiment, but out of pure greed. And they will use anyone, including my daughter, to get it. The video ended, freezing on Jonathan's concerned face. Ashley remained motionless, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. He was protecting us, she whispered finally. All this time it was more than just his illness. Your uncles aren't the family connection they pretend to be, I confirmed gently. They're opportunists who see you as the easiest path to what they want. She wiped her tears, anger replacing grief in her expression. They've been lying to me, haven't they? About everything? Except the fact that the house is worth millions. That part is true. But they didn't tell you about the full resort project, or why the property is so crucial to the developer's plans. Understanding lit up her eyes. They're trying to con us. Us? I repeated, feeling a surge of hope. That means you're back on my side, Mom. I never left your side. She looked down, ashamed. I wanted to feel connected to Dad through his family. They had stories about him as a kid, photos I'd never seen. I understand, I assured her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Grief makes us vulnerable in ways we can't foresee, but now we need to be smarter than them, together. Ashley straightened up, her expression shifting from devastation to determination, so much like Jonathan that my heart ached. What's the plan? I smiled, feeling the first real sense of confidence since this ordeal began. First, we meet with my attorney tonight. Not the family lawyer your uncles want to use, but someone recommended by Mr. Harrison. Then tomorrow, we have an appointment with Summit Resorts. Why? Because knowledge is power, and we now know something your uncles don't. Exactly how much the property is truly worth to the developer. I showed her the documents from Jonathan's war room. They think they're dealing with an uninformed widow and a naive niece. It's time to show them exactly who they're up against. For the first time since Jonathan's death, Ashley laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. Dad always said you were the smartest person he ever met. That beneath that quiet literature professor was a strategist who could outmaneuver anyone if properly motivated. He really said that? I asked, surprised. All the time. She smiled, wiping away the last tears. He also said the biggest mistake anyone could make was to underestimate Elizabeth Davis. As we left the coffee shop together, I felt a shift in the dynamic of this battle. The Davis brothers had unwittingly united us instead of dividing us. They had no idea that their initial apparent success with Ashley had only set the stage for their ultimate defeat. Later that night, with Ashley by my side, I presented my complete plan to the attorney Jonathan had recommended, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in high-value estate disputes. Her expression shifted from professional interest to undisguised admiration as she grasped the full scope of what I was proposing. "Miss Davis," she said finally, "your husband told me you would surprise me with your strategic thinking. He was right." "My husband," I replied, "was right about many things, including his belief in my capacity not just to survive his death, but to emerge stronger from the crucible of grief and betrayal." The next morning I returned to the Crestwood estate to prepare for the final phase of my plan. Ashley had gone back to her apartment to gather some clothes, planning to stay with me at the estate for at least a week. She would join me later, after stopping by the university to request an extension on her assignments. Alone in the house, I found myself drawn to the art studio. The morning light poured through the windows, illuminating the space in a way that made my fingers itch to hold a brush again. I approached one of the easels, running my hand over its smooth surface. 15 years. That's how long it had been since I'd painted seriously. I'd sketched occasionally, kept a journal with watercolor illustrations, but not created real art, not the kind that had once defined me. I opened a drawer filled with pristine brushes and selected one, testing its weight in my hand. Then I uncapped a tube of cerulean blue, my favorite color from my art school days. The scent brought back memories of studios and exhibitions, of late nights and the rush of creation. On an impulse, I selected a small canvas and set it on the easel. Without overthinking, I began to paint. Not an orchid, I wasn't ready for that yet, but the view from the window, the gardens below, the mountains in the distance, the sky stretching endlessly above. Simple shapes, colors blending into one another, no pressure for perfection. I lost track of time, allowing muscle memory to guide my hands. When I finally stepped back, I was surprised to find tears on my cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but of release. Something that had been locked away inside me for years had finally been set free. The sound of a car approaching pulled me from my reverie. Setting down the brush, I moved to the window. A black SUV was coming up the driveway. Michael's vehicle. He was alone. My first instinct was wariness, but this unexpected solo visit played perfectly into my plan. I quickly texted Ashley to let her know about the visitor, then headed downstairs. I opened the door before Michael could knock. His momentary surprise at my immediate appearance quickly gave way to his practiced smile. "Elizabeth, I was hoping we could talk. Just the two of us." "I'm listening," I replied, not inviting him in, making him state his purpose on the threshold. He glanced past me into the house. "This might be better discussed inside." "I prefer the porch," I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. "What can I do for you, Michael?" His smile faltered slightly at my directness. I wanted to apologize for how our last meeting went. Things escalated in ways that weren't productive. And I wanted to present an alternative proposal, one that might better serve everyone's interests. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document folder. "This is a more generous division. Half for you, a quarter for Ashley, a quarter for my brothers and me." I took the folder but didn't open it. What prompted this sudden generosity? "Family reflection," he said smoothly. "Jonathan would have wanted us to resolve this amicably. Ashley is my niece, after all." I noted his strategic use of Ashley's name, a reminder of the connection he believed he'd established. Little did he know how completely that connection had been severed. "I appreciate you bringing this by," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'll review it with my attorney." We could finalize everything by the end of the week, he pressed, before the situation becomes more complicated. Complicated how? Legal battles can get messy, Elizabeth. Documents get filed, allegations made, family laundry aired. Nobody wants that. The threat was thinly veiled, but I'd been expecting it. Jonathan's videos had predicted this exact approach, the isolation, the seemingly reasonable offer, followed by the implicit threat. I'll give your proposal the consideration it deserves, I said, watching his confidence grow as he misinterpreted my response as acquiescence. That's all I ask. He extended his hand. We're family after all. I shook it briefly. I'll be in touch soon. As his SUV disappeared down the driveway, I smiled to myself. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Michael believed he was setting a trap, never suspecting that he was the one being led into an ambush. Inside, I opened his folder and reviewed the documents. As expected, the generous offer included clauses that would give the brothers operational control of the property, even with a minority stake. The language was cleverly crafted to seem fair, while concealing multiple loopholes that would allow them to force a full sale later. I placed the papers in Jonathan's war room, adding them to the growing body of evidence showing the brothers' true intentions. Then I checked my watch. I had a video call with the executives from Summit Resorts in 20 minutes, a call that would change the entire dynamic of this conflict. The Davis brothers arrived at the Crestwood estate exactly when I expected them, at 10 o'clock sharp, 3 days after my meeting with Ashley. Their black SUV drove up the driveway with the confidence of men who believed victory was merely a formality. Behind them followed a silver sedan I didn't recognize, likely their attorney or financial consultant. I watched from the study window, dressed not in the casual clothes they had previously seen, but in a tailored suit I had purchased specifically for this meeting. Appearances matter when orchestrating a reckoning, and I intended to present myself not as a grieving widow, but as the formidable adversary Jonathan always knew me to be. "They've arrived," I alerted Ashley, who appeared from the library looking equally professional in a navy dress, her father's watch, one of his most prized possessions, prominently displayed on her wrist. "Ready?" she asked, nervousness and determination conflicting in her expression. "Completely." I squeezed her hand. "Remember, let them corner themselves first." Ms. Jackson appeared. The others came through the back entrance. "They're ready in the dining room as you requested." I nodded my thanks. Perfect timing. The doorbell rang, and Ms. Jackson went to answer it with the practiced deference of someone who knew her role in this carefully choreographed performance. "Good morning, gentlemen. Mrs. Davis and Ashley are waiting this way, please." They entered with the easy familiarity of men accustomed to controlling environments. Michael led, followed by Daniel with his ever-present legal folder, and Thomas bringing up the rear. Behind them walked a gray-haired man in an expensive suit who radiated corporate authority. "Elizabeth," Michael nodded, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. This is Mr. Chen, the CFO of Davis Investments. We thought it would be productive to have a financial specialist join our discussion of the property's potential." So they had brought in a financial executive to intimidate me with technical jargon and market valuations. Predictable. "How thoughtful," I replied smoothly. "I've prepared the dining room for our meeting. Follow me." I led them through the house, noting their evaluative glances at the renovations Jonathan had completed. In the formal dining room, a large table had been set with documents at each place setting, water bottles and coffee. The picture of professional preparation. "Please have a seat," I gestured. "I believe we have much to discuss." As they settled in, expressions of confidence still firmly in place, I remained standing at the head of the table. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to thank you for your previous proposal. It was educational." Michael's smile widened, clearly interpreting my comment as capitulation. "We're pleased you took the time to consider our offer. With Mr. Chen's expertise, we can discuss the most advantageous arrangement for dividing the property's assets." "Yes, Division," I said, picking up a remote control from the table. "That's precisely what I'd like to discuss." I pressed a button, and a hidden screen descended from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The brothers exchanged surprised glances. Clearly, they did not expect this level of preparation. "If you would direct your attention to the presentation," I continued, clicking the remote again. A detailed map of the Crestwood estate appeared on the screen, showing the property's boundaries, topographical features, and its position relative to the surrounding area. "This is the full survey of the Crestwood estate," I explained. "The entire 25 acres, not just the 10 acres mentioned in your proposal." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "The western portion is an undevelopable preservation area. We excluded it for the sake of simplicity." "How considerate," I replied with irony, "except for one small detail." Another click of the remote, and the map overlaid with the full resort project. All phases, including the golf course, Summit Resorts had been keeping secret. Mr. Chen straightened in his chair, his professional mask slipping as he leaned in to study the projection with sudden interest. "As you can see," I continued calmly, "Phase 2 of the project extends predominantly over the western area of our property, the acres you so generously offered to exclude from our fair division." Michael's face turned red. "Those plans are just speculation. The analysis from Davis Investments indicates—" "Actually," a new voice interrupted as the side door opened. "Those plans have been confirmed by the Summit Resorts board itself." The Davis brothers turned in shock as Mr. Alston, the CEO of Summit Resorts, walked into the room, followed by Rebecca Torres and two executives in formal suits. "What is this?" Michael demanded, half rising. "This," I replied pleasantly, "is a meeting about the true value and future of the Crestwood estate. Mr. Alston has expressed a significant interest in the property, particularly after reviewing the complete documents my husband compiled regarding the resort project." Mr. Chen shot a betrayed look at the Davis brothers. "I was told you had exclusive negotiating rights to this property." "They do not," Rebecca Torres interjected calmly, placing additional documents on the table. "Mrs. Davis holds clear and unquestionable title to the entire property. The documents the Davis gentlemen showed you are without legal merit." Michael slammed his hand on the table. "This property has been in the Davis family for generations. Jonathan had a moral obligation." "Moral obligations?" Ashley spoke for the first time, her voice firm despite her hand gripping the water glass. "Like the moral obligation you had to my father when you defrauded his inheritance, or forged his signature on documents, or threatened to incriminate him if he exposed you." The brothers froze, the color draining from their faces. "What exactly is she talking about?" Mr. Chen asked, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Perhaps this will clarify," I said, nodding to Rebecca, who distributed sealed envelopes to everyone at the table. "Copies of the documentation my husband preserved regarding certain transactions involving the Davis family assets. I believe the statute of limitations has expired on some of these matters, but the IRS and state tax authorities might find others quite interesting." Daniel opened his envelope, examining the contents with growing alarm. "These are private family matters," he stammered, "completely irrelevant to the current discussion." "On the contrary," I refuted, finally taking my seat at the head of the table. "They establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior that directly impacts your credibility in these negotiations. Behavior that continued when you deliberately misled Mr. Chen about your position to negotiate this property." The room fell silent as the Davis brothers realized the totality of their exposure. Jonathan had documented everything: their historical crimes against him, their recent manipulations, their attempts to appropriate valuable assets while appearing generous. "What do you want, Elizabeth?" Michael finally asked, his facade of confidence crumbling. "I want you to leave the Crestwood estate and never return," I stated simply. "I want you to cease all attempts to contest my ownership or manipulate my daughter. In exchange, these documents will remain private." Mr. Chen stood up abruptly. "I believe my involvement in this matter was based on incomplete and potentially fraudulent information. If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Davis, I will contact you directly for any future discussions." He shot a look of contempt at the brothers before exiting. Michael's face reddened as he watched his ally depart. "You have no idea what you're doing, Elizabeth. The development costs for the western area are prohibitive. The logistics alone—" "Actually," Mr. Alston interjected, "Summit Resorts has developed new construction methods specifically suited for this type of terrain. We are prepared to make Mrs. Davis an offer that recognizes both the challenges and the exceptional potential of this property." As the meeting continued, transforming from the Davis brothers' planned takeover into my carefully orchestrated counteroffensive, I caught Ashley's eye across the table. Her faint smile conveyed everything: pride, vindication, and the bittersweet recognition that Jonathan had prepared us for this moment, even from beyond the grave. When the Davis brothers finally left 2 hours later, defeated, exposed, and legally bound by the agreement Rebecca had pre-prepared, the future of the Crestwood estate was secured exactly as Jonathan had envisioned. Not divided among greedy relatives, not sold to the highest bidder, but preserved as a legacy for the family he had chosen and loved. As their vehicles disappeared down the driveway, Ms. Jackson appeared at my side. "Your husband would be proud," she said calmly. "You outsmarted them exactly as he believed you would." I watched the dust settle on the road, a strange mixture of emotions washing over me. Triumph mingled with grief, strength emerging from vulnerability. "We're not finished yet," I replied, thinking of the videos that still awaited on Jonathan's laptop, of the future that stretched out before us. This was only the first battle, but it was one we won decisively, using the weapons Jonathan had meticulously prepared and the strength he always saw in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself.